By all accounts, Jesus was a hippie. He went against his establishment. You think back in the 60s, he went against his establishment. And yet, in the 60s, who were the biggest critics of those who went against the establishment? The churches that he created were the biggest critics of those who went against the establishment that existed. And so, do you see the dynamics that sort of show up in the context of us thinking about Jesus? He was confronted in the garden by his captors, and Peter, of course, immediately pulls a sword out and he cuts the ear off of one of the guards, and Jesus stops him. And he says, no. He said, those who live by the sword die by the sword, and he peacefully gave up and went with his captors, knowing that this was not going to have a very positive outcome in terms of his physical life. Now, he could have stood up before the crowds and called them out, called them into supporting him. He could have stood up and said, this is unjust, this is inappropriate, you need to step up and support me, it's time to overthrow the established religious order, blah, 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 blah. And he probably would have gotten a lot of people who would have said, yes, he's finally doing what it is that we wanted him to do. We wanted to bring forth his life. And yet, he didn't do that. That he gave it to God. He stood before Pilate and said, you would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. You would have no power over me unless it was given you from above. And this was said after he had been brutalized and beaten. Not before. After he had gone through some pretty serious abuse of his body. So I think that the example that he sets is really about the courage it takes for us to really give it to God. When we think of Jesus' life, we think of how did he show up and give it to what he called his Father, to give it to God, to give it to that spiritual essence of who we are. We're not giving it to some capricious being that is changing its mind and that is on an emotional roller coaster. We're giving it to our divine self, that part of us that is connected with the universe, with the spiritual ethers, which is connected with God. When we give it up to God, we're giving it up to the spiritual realm. We're saying, I can't do it anymore as a physical human being. Now, whatever needs to happen in spirit. I need to give it into spirit, and then we need to step back and let spirit do what spirit is there to do its work, to create that which needs to be created, to open the doors that need to be opened, to bring patience, wisdom, confidence, willingness, are all part of us being willing to fail in order to succeed. Jesus was willing to fail in order to bring forth what it is that was his to bring forth. And failure is a relative term anyway. I mean, we're all taught in the motivational courses that failure is one more step to success, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of the mindset that is being put forth. It's that most successful people had many failures on their way to whatever success that they had, because failure is a learning process. So when we think of failure not as failure but as a learning process, then we think, okay, it's okay to fail. I can give it to God. I can give it to Spirit, and I can step back, and I can let Spirit do its work, and I can let Spirit bring me to the job that I need. I can let Spirit find a way to pay this bill that's coming due in 2 weeks that I don't have the money in my bank account for. I can let Spirit lead me to the right relationship or to the right circumstances or to whatever it is that I need, because I've done everything that I can do that's reasonable, that's appropriate, that is of the highest and best order. I can let Spirit make this business a success if I just step back and listen and follow the wisdom that is present. I'll be guided to the clients and the people that I need to see. I'll be guided to where it is that I need to go, because Spirit is going before me and making smooth the way for me to do what is mine to do. And it may not be that specific situation that I think it needs to be. It may be something entirely different, and that's where the challenge shows up. That's where we must be willing to allow things to unfold and not try to control things. Jesus was not about victory or conquest or fighting or controlling or manipulating. He was giving the fight to God and allowing God to do what is God's to do. You know, I think one of the best ways that we learn about giving up is in raising children. I have learned more about giving up in the raising of my 4 children than probably any other single thing other than ministry, perhaps, in my life. And that truth came home to me a couple weeks ago when Caroline came home over Labor Day weekend from college, and she comes in on Friday. She shows up about 6:30 p.m. Friday evening. She comes in the house, changes her clothes, and by 7 she was off to the high school football game of her high school to see all of her friends and stuff, which is fine. So the next morning, I get up and I'm sitting at the kitchen table. It's about 8 o'clock. I'm finishing up my breakfast, reading the paper, and all of a sudden the car pulls in the driveway and I could see the car, so you come down into the carport, and I thought, My first thought was, who got up and went out this morning? And then Caroline came in and I realized that she was just getting home. Now, every bone in my human body wanted to get up and say, girl, what were you doing out all night last night? You know, the whole thing, what's going on, tell me, you know. And then I thought, the next thought was, she's almost 19. She's living away from home. When she's not here, she can do that all she wants there, and I don't know about it. So my job is to give up. Steve, just give it up. Give it up to God. It's in God's hands at this point. And isn't that true the whole time you're raising a child? Is every step you're giving it up. You're giving up, you're giving up, you're giving up, you're giving up, and pretty soon, well, of course, you probably never all totally give up. You know, you always, as a parent, you always have some sort of attachment, but that's the process of parenthood, is giving up. Well, it turned out she stayed overnight with one of her friends that she met at the game, and you know, our deal was that when she did that, she's supposed to call, but she's not used to doing that now that she's in college, so she didn't think about it until the morning, so she got up early and came home, you know, because she thought her mom would need her car, and so she's actually being responsible. It was me that was jumping to conclusions, you know. So that's how it... I didn't hear that, whatever it was. 2 weeks later, she calls me and says, I want to take some friends up to the lake place for the weekend. And I said, okay, that's fine. So they did. Next weekend, they go up to the lake, you know, and I said, I'm going to be nervous the whole weekend, so you got to call me a couple times, just let me know everything's okay. But I called all the neighbors and said, watch him. I said, you got 18-year-old, you got some 18-year-old kids coming, there's no adults, watch them.
There's no adults.
And then I realized, well, they're almost adults, or they are adults, or they're sort of adults, you know. Everything went fine, you know. And so, again, it's about giving up, right? But I called the neighbors back later and said, how'd it go? And it went fine. There was 9 of them that went up. Started out at 4, then it was 9. So they were water skiing, using the boat, doing all this stuff. And I was, oh, boy, you know. Give it up, Steve. Give it up. Okay? And my problem is I think about what I would do if I was in that situation. That's my problem. When I was 18, I think, okay. So it's really about me in this case. You know, it's about my own reality. She's very responsible. You know, it's true in ministry. Ministry is about giving up.